You wake up slowly, stirred by the faint sound of iron scraping against stone. Outside your thin walls, the quiet hum of early morning work begins. A distant clink, someone sharpening a blade. The year is 1347. You are no longer in the world you once knew. You live in a thatched cottage, nestled among fields that stretch under a pale, unkind sky. The walls of your home are made of wattle and daub, patched over the years with care and desperation. The roof is straw, slightly leaking at the corners, the floor packed earth. The air inside smells of wood smoke, damp straw, and the lingering scent of animals that share the space with your family. Chickens cluck softly in the corner. A goat rustles in the small pen by the door. Each day begins long before the sun rises fully above the hills. You slip out from under a rough wool blanket, your breath visible in the cold air. You stretch, not expecting comfort. The stiffness in your back has been with you for years. You walk outside, boots crunching softly on the frostbitten earth. The sky is colorless, washed in hues of gray. You step into the slow rhythm of your day. You check the coop. No new eggs. The hens are thin. You draw water from the well, cold and metallic. Breakfast is a simple bowl of thin porridge, made from barley. You eat in silence, chewing slowly, savoring each bite though there's little taste. Your role in the village is that of a tenant farmer. You work land that is not your own, tending crops and livestock for the Lord. Your family has lived here for generations, each one rising and falling with the health of the soil and the whims of weather. The fields are tired. Rain has not come in weeks, and before that it came too much. Crops wilt under the harsh sun, then drown in flooded earth. The grain stores from the previous year are nearly gone. You ration carefully, measuring out oats and barley with practiced patience. There is no meat today, nor yesterday, nor last week. You recall when the food began to dwindle. The birds left early that year. The river fish became scarce. A blight took several pigs. Slowly, quietly, food vanished. Now you see it in the eyes of your neighbors. Hollowed cheeks, lingering gazes at shared meals. You try to maintain routines. You mend tools, repair fences, turn soil. You trade what little you can spare. Wool from your sheep, eggs from your hens, small bundles of herbs. The village market is quiet. No one speaks loudly. Even laughter feels out of place. The lord of the manor increases his demands. Taxes are due, regardless of harvest. His steward rides through the village, flanked by armed men. You bow as they pass, eyes lowered. You hand over a sack of grain that you cannot spare. It will be missed. Evening comes early. The sun disappears behind low clouds. The wind picks up and you hurry home, clutching your cloak. Inside, you light a small fire with care. The children huddle close. You make more porridge, thinner than the last. You add a few wild greens for flavor. You eat slowly. Night falls, and the village becomes silent. A dog barks, then nothing. You lie awake for some time listening. There is no distant song, no echo of celebration. Just the wind and the creak of old wood. You close your eyes and let sleep take you. The next morning brings little change. Another day of the same. Yet a new face appears on the road. A rider, hunched and weary, his cloak tattered by long travel. He brings no joy, only words. "There is worse coming," he says quietly. No one speaks. You return to your chores, slower now. The day continues, gentle and colorless. You hold on to the routine, to the quiet acts of survival. Your family gathers around the hearth each night. Silence often fills the room. There is little energy for stories, and even fewer reasons to smile. You fix your gaze on the flicker of the flame, counting breaths between the pops of the wood. When you sleep, it's often shallow. You hear the wind in the thatch, the quiet shifting of your children in the dark. Hunger is a companion that never leaves. Even in dreams, you find yourself searching, digging in soil, foraging in empty woods. You tend a garden behind the cottage. Most of the plants have withered, but you refuse to pull them up. You water them with care, using what little you can spare. A few green shoots remain. It is enough to give you a reason to bend, to touch the earth, to hope. Occasionally, you see monks passing through, seeking alms and giving blessings. They carry small loaves, herbs, and parchment scrolls. You greet them respectfully. They speak of divine will, of patience and humility. You nod, not because you believe, but because it fills the quiet. A week passes. Then another. Still no rain. You begin drying weeds to stretch your food. You chew slowly, not for taste, but to trick your stomach. Some villagers speak of leaving, heading to distant lands where fields are said to flourish. You do not consider it. This is your home, no matter how bitter. By now, you recognize every creak of the cottage, every shift in wind, every shadow that crosses your small window. You are alert not from fear but habit. The habits of hunger, of repetition, of holding on. One day, a child from another family does not rise. Word spreads slowly. No one says it aloud, but all understand. The villagers gather wood, quietly building a pyre. There are no prayers, just the solemn rhythm of motion. You help, hands steady. That evening, the sky reddens briefly. For a moment, everyone looks up. The clouds shift, and it almost feels like rain. But none comes. You return home. The days do not change much. But you continue. One foot in front of the other. One meal then the next. Not because of joy or faith, but because it is what you do. It is what you've always done. The air hangs heavier each morning, as though time itself has slowed. Birds no longer greet the dawn. Their songs, once woven into your routine, have faded into memory. Even the rooster, once your faithful alarm, now crows only once, if at all. You rise quietly, slipping from your bed so as not to wake the children, though they usually rise from hunger before light touches the window. You walk the same path you always do, from the door to the well to the field, from the field to the coop. Yet now, each step feels as though it carries the weight of the entire season. The tools you carry, hoe, rake, bucket, feel heavier not because of their weight, but from what they represent, effort without reward. In the village square, fewer people gather. Where once the baker, the thatcher, the blacksmith stood and spoke in the early hours, now there are just shadows moving behind closed doors. A potter's wheel sits still beside a shuttered window. No smoke rises from the smithy. No songs from the weaver's home. There is work to do, always, but little strength to do it. You exchange nods with those you pass. Words are scarce. Every conversation begins with a sigh, a shrug, or silence. The old woman who once tended herbs by the chapel has not been seen in 3 days. Her cat sits on the stone step, staring down the road. You wonder if it waits for her return, or simply knows she won't. Each evening, the silence deepens. No dogs bark. No children play. The wind moves through the village like a careful guest, rattling doors, brushing dry leaves across paths. Inside your cottage, you ration the evening meal again. Your hands know the pattern. Half a bowl per person, a little more water this time. Your youngest asks if spring will come soon. You do not answer. Instead, you gesture to the hearth and stoke the flame, even though there is little wood left. The flicker is not just heat. It is motion, it is presence, it is something to watch. Sleep comes in fragments. You lie in bed, not counting sheep, but thoughts. You try to remember what laughter felt like, what it sounded like echoing across the green. You think of summers past, of harvest dances, of bread thick with butter. You do not allow yourself to cry. Not here. Not where little eyes might see. The church bell, once a steady rhythm marking the hours of the day, now tolls only for death. Its sound, heavy and drawn out, spreads across the countryside like fog. When it rings, the village pauses. Everyone knows what it means. And then, quietly, they return to their tasks. You help dig a grave. It's for a man you knew, but not closely. Still, you remember him laughing once. That's enough to make your hands work with care. The ground is hard. The shovel scrapes shallow earth, uncovering roots and pebbles. There is no priest. Just 4 of you, bent in the cold, finishing the task. Back home, your daughter has found a patch of green behind the shed. A weed, but alive. She brings it in, cups it like treasure. You set it in a bowl of water and place it near the window. Everyone looks at it through the evening. No one speaks, but in their silence, you sense something unfamiliar. Perhaps it is hope. The silence of the village is no longer just from hunger or grief. It becomes a kind of language, a way of holding space. The moments you share with others are quieter, but also deeper. You learn to read the flicker of a glance, the way someone lingers near the fire, the hesitation before they knock. On the 7th day of the month, you wake to frost. It sparkles on the ground like shattered glass. You step outside and breathe deeply. The air is sharp, but it feels clean. A new kind of cold. Your neighbor passes you and offers a single word. Morning. It is the first thing he's said in weeks. You nod, and for a moment it is enough. The village well begins to dry. The water level is lower each time you draw. You adjust, collecting dew with cloths, setting out pots for morning condensation. These are small rituals. They will not save you, but they keep you moving. In the chapel, candles burn constantly now. Not because of prayer, but for warmth. You step inside sometimes not to kneel, but just to sit. The pews are empty. The air is thick with wax and dust. A few villagers do the same. You do not speak. You just sit, surrounded by quiet flame. Later in the week, a stranger appears. Not the messenger, but another wanderer. A woman this time. She wears layers of linen and wool, her face marked by wind and time. She carries nothing but a sack and a staff. She nods at you. The road is empty, she says. You nod in return. She stays one night, then leaves before dawn. You never ask her name. And so the village continues, slowly, silently, gently decaying. But not without dignity. There is no uprising, no collapse, only the slow drawing inward of each soul, each home, each heart. You keep waking, keep walking, keep cooking what little you have. The days are nearly indistinguishable. But sometimes you notice the small things. A spider building in the corner. The way sunlight briefly catches the edge of the water pail. The softness in your child's hair as they lean on your shoulder. These things do not make the hunger disappear, but they remind you that you are still here. Hunger begins to reshape your life. Not just the growl in your stomach, but the shape of your thoughts, your days, your decisions. It becomes something almost familiar, a constant presence like the weather or the passing of time. You no longer expect satisfaction after meals. Instead, you eat for function, for survival. A piece of stale bread, a few boiled roots. It is enough, barely. You grow accustomed to lightness in your limbs, as if your bones carry less than they used to. You move with care. The sudden strength of a sneeze surprises you. Tasks that once took an hour now stretch through the morning. Even walking to the next field requires rest. But still you do it. Slowly, steadily. The village diet changes. Nettles are now steeped into teas. Tree bark is boiled for whatever essence it might provide. You try roasting acorns and crushing them into meal. They are bitter, but no more so than anything else. Children chew on twigs to occupy their mouths. There are no more dogs in the village. You do not speak of why. The cats are fewer too. The forest nearby is silent, and you no longer see the deer or foxes. Even crows seem sparse. Once you find a dead hare along the path. The entire village seems to gather around it. You divide the meat carefully, bones and all. You notice how your mind sharpens in strange places. You remember where wild mushrooms used to grow, and when to avoid them. You learn to distinguish edible weeds from those that bring sickness. Knowledge once dismissed as old wives' tales becomes survival. You remember the stories the healer used to tell, the ones you never believed. You wish you had listened more closely. In the mornings, you still go to the field. There is little to tend now, but you check the soil, walk the rows, remove the weeds. The routine keeps you grounded. It is not just about food anymore. It is about rhythm, motion, purpose. The lines of plowed earth are now like a map of your days. One morning, while digging, Your spade strikes something hard. A root, you think, but it turns out to be an old stone, worn and smooth. You brush it clean. It looks like a marker, maybe from some forgotten grave or boundary line. You sit beside it for a while, resting your hands on its cold surface. It reminds you that others were here long before, and others will come after. Inside your home, small things change. The beds are closer to the hearth now. You hang cloth along the walls to keep out the cold. Every scrap is saved. Bones, feathers, cloth, string. You've learned to make soup from almost nothing. Boiling water becomes a ritual. It fills the room with steam and the illusion of abundance. Some villagers begin bartering services more than goods. You trade help with repairs for firewood. A neighbor offers his son's time in exchange for herbs. The old structures of coin and tax mean less now. What matters is immediate usefulness. You keep a tally in your head of who helped whom. Trust becomes a quiet form of wealth. Those who are generous, even with little, become anchors for the rest. You try to be one of them. Not out of nobility, but because it keeps you connected. Because when your child is sick, you will need someone to come. The children adapt more quickly than the adults. They invent games using pebbles and dried stems. They laugh less, but they still laugh. Their joy is lighter, quieter, but it is not gone. You watch them with a kind of reverence. They do not understand the full weight of scarcity. You do not want them to. Your oldest asks questions you cannot answer. Why is the sky always gray? Why don't the trees grow anymore? Why does the bread taste like wood? You reply with vague stories, tales of spirits, of seasons that sleep, of sun gods who are angry but might be soothed. The truth feels too heavy to give. There are dreams now, frequent and vivid. You dream of overflowing baskets, tables heavy with fruit and cheese and roasted meat. You smell honey and milk. In one dream, you are walking through an orchard and apples fall around you like rain. You wake with your hand outstretched, still reaching. Some villagers mark days on their walls, scratching tallies into the wood. You do not. You prefer to let time pass without measure. The moon changes. The sky shifts. That is enough. The chapel bell rings less now. The clapper broke 2 weeks ago and no one has fixed it. People gather less often. Those who do come light candles and sit. There are no sermons. Only silence and presence. You begin to talk to yourself. Not aloud, but in your thoughts. You narrate your movements, remind yourself what to do next. Now I will collect water. Then I will patch the window. Then I will rest. This helps. It structures the day. It makes the emptiness feel less random. The hunger is not gone, but it has changed. It is quieter, woven into your breath, your gait, the curve of your spine. It is part of you now. It no longer cries out. It watches. Rain is something you stop expecting. You notice its absence not by the dryness of the soil, but by the silence of the sky. No thunder, no wind, no scent of moisture in the air, just a heavy stillness, pressing down like a forgotten blanket. You begin to wonder if rain was ever real, or just a story told to children. Each morning, you glance toward the horizon, searching for change. The clouds sometimes gather, but they never follow through. They shift and scatter like frightened animals. Even the animals sense it. The hens no longer scratch at the dirt with purpose. The goat bleats less often. You begin to think they've learned resignation. The village elders remember times of rain, and they tell of it like myth. In those days, they say, you could hear the drops on the roof like a song. But even they speak more softly now, as if afraid their memories will slip away. Water becomes ritual. Every drop you find is measured, stored, honored. You collect dew on cloth, funnel it into jars. You dig shallow pits to catch condensation. Children help, using cups made from hollowed wood. It is not enough, but it becomes part of the day. A task with meaning. The crops you had hoped to salvage shrink further into the earth. Leaves curl and fall. Soil hardens, refusing to yield. You walk the furrows, dragging your fingers along the ground, hoping to find signs of life. There are few. Even weeds struggle to survive. You find a single green sprout near the fence post and mark it with a stone, visiting it each day as if it were sacred. The children begin to call it by name, little jokes to lighten the moment. You smile, but only for them. You dig a new well, though you know it is folly. The old men advise against it. The water's too deep now, they say. But you dig anyway. With each shovelful your hands blister. The earth is stubborn, packed, dry as bone. After days you hit rock. No water. The sun rises high and stays longer. Shadows shrink. The heat is not sharp but dull and lingering. It weighs on you. Clothes feel heavier. Breathing feels slower. You carry water not just for drinking, but to sprinkle near the doors, to cool the dust. People begin to speak of moving, packing what they can and walking east, or north, or wherever there are rumors of rivers. You do not judge them. You do not try to follow. Your roots feel too deep, even if the soil no longer feeds you. The chapel windows are always open now. Inside, it is cooler. You find yourself sitting there more often, not praying, just sitting. Sometimes others join. You sit in silence, hands folded or resting on knees, waiting for something, anything to change. The children's games change too. They no longer run much, but instead sit and draw in the dust with sticks. They draw rivers, fish, waterfalls. You watch quietly. You wish they had known those things in life, not just through stories. Sometimes you hear thunder in the distance, but it never comes close. You wait at the window, eyes fixed on the sky, until the sound fades. It becomes another echo of something you used to trust. One night, you dream of rain, not just falling but pouring. You stand beneath it, arms wide, soaked through to the skin. The feeling is so vivid you wake expecting dampness. But the air is still, your skin dry. Hope becomes quiet, then smaller. But still it flickers. You do not speak it aloud. Instead, you keep walking to the field. You check the soil. You wipe the dust from the windowsill. You collect dew from the leaves. These acts are your language now, your ritual. A traveling monk arrives one morning. He carries no goods, only a staff and a cloth bag. He speaks in metaphors. Even the stone thirsts, he says. He gives no solutions, just stories and a handful of dried herbs. You thank him. He sleeps in the chapel, then moves on. The villagers host no more gatherings. But you still see each other. In glances, in gestures, in the way someone leaves a turnip near a doorstep without knocking. These are your feasts now. Silent offerings. The air smells of dust. The fields are a pale, exhausted brown. The birds are fewer. But you remain. Not because you expect relief, but because this is your place, your soil. Even when it is dry, even when it yields nothing. You whisper to yourself at night, rain will come. Perhaps not tomorrow, but it will come. The days begin to blur. Without enough food, without rain, and without festivity, there is little to distinguish one sunrise from the next. The calendar means little now. Sunday feels like Tuesday. The only measure of time is how many candles you've used, how low the woodpile sinks, how tightly your belt fits. You wake up not from rest, but from habit. Light filters through the cracks in the wooden slats. A rooster cries out, not as loudly as he once did. You open your eyes, lie still, and listen. A child breathing. The wind brushing past the shutters. The sound of a ladle scraping a pot. These are the sounds of a new day. Your movements are slower now. Not from laziness, but conservation. Every step is chosen. Every chore is purposeful. You no longer sweep the floors unless dust is choking the room. You no longer boil water twice. Everything is reduced to function. The sky changes often, but never with rain. Sometimes it turns pale blue, sometimes silver, sometimes an odd orange near the horizon. You learn to read nothing into it. The clouds are no longer promises, just shapes. One day your child asks, "What day is it?" You pause. You start to reply but stop. You don't know. You say, "It's the day we gather more kindling." The answer is accepted. That becomes the name of the day. The village's rhythm adjusts. The blacksmith's hammer strikes less often. The weaver's shuttle no longer clicks through the window at dusk. The baker has no flour. The market is more of a meeting place now. People trade conversation more than goods. A man carves flutes out of dry wood. He gives one to a boy, who blows softly into it. A small, weak sound emerges. The child laughs, a single note of joy. You remember that sound all day. You start to mark time with moments. Not with hours or bells, but with tiny changes. The first bud on a vine, even if it never opens. A hen that lays a single egg. A fire that lasts longer than expected. You begin to keep a mental list. These are your new hours. You walk to the edge of the woods sometimes. Not to hunt, not to forage. Just to see something different. You stand at the line where trees meet field. The air is cooler there. You notice your breath. You let it slow. Then you walk back. You see less of your neighbors, but that doesn't mean you've forgotten them. You recognize their footprints in the mud. You see the curl of smoke from their chimneys. Once, someone leaves a pot of stew at your door. You do not know who. You eat it slowly over 2 days. You learn to listen to silence. It teaches you things. You hear mice in the walls. You hear birds return for a single hour and then vanish. You hear the creak of old beams settling at night. None of it frightens you anymore. It's just part of life. You teach the children to sew, to mend, to sharpen. Not as chores, but as rituals. A way to shape the long afternoons. Their small hands fumble at first, then improve. You praise them gently. They smile. Your spouse spends more time looking out the window. Not waiting for anything, just watching. Sometimes they narrate what they see. A squirrel, they say. 2 clouds. A cart with a broken wheel. Their voice is soft, like a thread. The chapel's candles burn low now. Wax is rare. The priest does not preach. He sits beside you sometimes, staring at the same flame. You exchange no words. There's no need. On what you think might be a Thursday, you find a book in the attic. Leather-bound, pages warped from time. You can't read every word, but you trace the letters. You imagine the person who once held it. Maybe they were hungry too. Some evenings, stories return. Not loud tales or songs, but quiet memories shared around the hearth. Once, I saw a fox leap into the air. Once, the snow came so high it touched the window. These are the new legends. You dream less now. Or maybe you just forget the dreams. But your waking life feels dreamlike anyway. The slow passage of time. The weight of each gesture. The softness of everything around you. You do not count the days anymore. You just live them. One at a time. One breath. One meal. One glance at the sky. The meals you once considered strange now become ordinary. Boiled nettles. Thistle root. Beet leaves steeped with bark. These things fill your bowl more often than not. You chew slowly, adjusting your tongue to the bitterness. Sometimes you swallow before the taste settles. You used to eat for joy. Now you eat for function. You eat what grows, what's left behind, what others overlook. The word food changes meaning. It no longer implies flavor, variety, or comfort. It becomes simply that which sustains. You discover the uses of things you once pulled from the garden and tossed aside. Carrot tops, radish stems, dandelions, wild onion. You crush acorns into flour, leach them to remove bitterness, and bake them into hard cakes. They fill the stomach if not the spirit. Your body adjusts. It learns to live with less. The sharp pangs of hunger soften into a dull ache. Your skin tightens. Your hands tremble less than they did in the beginning. You sleep lightly, but you wake steady. Children grow thinner. They no longer ask for seconds. They eat quietly, hands in their laps between bites. They don't complain. You've taught them not to. They look at the food with reverence, even if it's a bowl of boiled grass. You begin to forage with care. In the woods, you recognize more plants now. You thank the trees that still offer nuts. You mark the earth where mushrooms return. You walk slowly, watching where the deer once passed, where berries used to grow. One day, you find a honeycomb inside a fallen log. It's old, abandoned, but inside is still some dark, thick honey. You scoop it out with your fingers. It is the sweetest thing you've tasted in months. You share it at home in silence. Each drop is a moment. The meat is rare. Sometimes a bird is snared, or a rabbit found dead, likely from age or cold. You clean it with ritual. You cook it slowly over low flame, with herbs that mask the scent. You stretch it over days, each shred added to soup. Bones are boiled until they soften, then boiled again. The broth is thin, but warm. It smells like survival. Neighbors begin to exchange recipes. Not in the way you once did, but as lifelines. Boil the stems twice. Soak the nuts overnight. Mix bark with ground grain. They speak softly, passing knowledge like folded notes. Insects enter your thoughts, not out of desperation but practicality. You roast a handful of beetles once unsure. They crunch like old seeds. Your spouse tries one, shrugs, and says nothing. Later you gather more. You begin to grow a small crop indoors, sprouts mostly. Lentils or beans soaked, then left to bloom in damp cloth. It's a trick you learned from a traveler. They don't yield much, but they add green to your life. You drink less for pleasure, more for need. Boiled water, tea from dry weeds, a fermented barley drink that is more sour than sweet. Still, it warms the belly. There's a tree in the village square that drops tiny fruit. No one knows its name. A few people remember it being ornamental. But now, each fruit is gathered, stewed, and preserved. It becomes a symbol of luck, of patience. The old man down the path teaches you how to trap small birds using string and a bell. You try it, feel ashamed at first. But when it works, and your children eat well for 2 nights, you thank the bird under your breath. Your understanding of food becomes intimate. You feel it in the soil, in your breath, in your palms. You look at a weed and think not of its nuisance, but of its root, its seed, its use. Hunger trains your eyes. Even the ashes from the fire become useful. Mixed with water, they clean your hands. Added to compost, they feed the soil. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is dismissed. One morning, you wake to find mushrooms on the windowsill, left by someone. A quiet gift. You stew them that evening, and your home smells like the woods for the first time in weeks. Food is not comfort, but it is still connection. Each shared bite, each traded handful, each gathered sprig is a thread between you and others. The meal may be humble, but the act of eating remains sacred. Some villagers begin to speak of leaving. Not loudly, not together, but in whispers behind doors, between glances. They speak of distant towns, of rumors heard from travelers, of markets that still function. You hear the words and say nothing, but they stay in your mind. It begins with a family of 3. One morning, their house stands open, the hearth cold, the beds bare. No note, no farewell, just silence. You walk past slowly. The village is quieter than usual that day. You don't blame them. You wonder what it took. The decision, the preparation, the last look back. You try to imagine their steps on the road, their hope, their fear. You feel the weight of their choice in your own bones. Then another family leaves. This one says goodbye, quietly. The father shakes your hand. The mother hugs your spouse. The children look tired but brave. You give them what you can, a small pouch of dried herbs, a cloth-wrapped cake. It's not much. The village adjusts. The absences become normal. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps. The silence stretches, reshaping the streets. Doors remain shut. Chimneys stop smoking. You remain. You ask yourself why. You look at your home, your field, your family. You think of the graves on the hill. You think of the chapel, the tree in the square, the stone near the well. You wonder if these are reasons or excuses. Your neighbor, an old man with shaking hands, tells you he will not leave. "This is where I was born," he says. "Let the wind take me here." You nod. You understand. A trader comes through the village one day. He carries salt, dried beans, a worn map. He speaks of places with full wells, green fields. He offers directions. But his eyes are tired, his stories scattered. You wonder how much is true. Still, the talk grows. Some pack slowly over weeks. Others pretend not to think of it, but gather supplies all the same. You sense the village at a tipping point, balanced between stillness and motion. You try to imagine the road. What would you carry? What would you leave? Would your feet hold up? Would your children? Would the hunger follow, or would it stay? One night, you and your spouse speak of it. Not urgently but seriously. You list what you'd need, what you could trade. You speak of danger, of uncertainty, of hope. Then you fall silent. You sleep beside each other unspeaking. In the morning you stay. But something in you shifts. You begin to prepare, not for departure but for choice. You gather what you might need. You mend packs. You dry food. You sharpen tools. Quiet acts. Simple ones. You do not speak of it to the children. Not yet. Each day, the village feels different. A kind of loosening. As though the soil itself is letting go of its people. But you still plant. You still sweep. You still gather kindling. Perhaps you will leave. Perhaps not. But now, when you wake, you ask yourself what path you would take and why. It becomes part of your rhythm. Like breath. It comes quietly, first as a crisp edge to the wind, then in a fine white dust on the morning rooftops. Frost. You knew it would return, but part of you had hoped it wouldn't. Not this year. Not with the fields so bare. Your breath fogs in the air now. The windows glaze in the early light. Inside your home, you gather the children's clothes and layer them with old wool, patched linen, anything to keep the cold from their skin. The frost does not kill what is already dead. The fields are empty. The trees brittle. But it does settle into the cracks of things, into joints, into bones, into the silence. The hearth must burn longer, though there is less wood to feed it. You ration more strictly. Meals are smaller. Hot water becomes comfort. A boiled root in a steaming bowl is enough to bring momentary peace. You wrap your fingers around the cup and hold it longer than necessary, just to feel warmth. Some say the cold will drive others away. A few families speak again of departure. But travel in frost is treacherous. Mud becomes ice. Roads crack. Night falls early. You feel the season settle into your chest. Not as sickness, but as stillness. A kind of quiet that arrives before snow, before night. You move through your day like a shadow, sweeping ash, checking the roof for leaks, counting kindling. Children become quieter. Their games shrink into corners near the fire. They carve small figures from twigs, make up stories, hum quietly. You sit nearby, listening. You try not to think of what winter usually meant. Gatherings, songs, full tables. Now winter is a test. You look out each morning for signs of snow. Not because you want it, but because you must know. The sky stays pale, stretched thin like a cold cloth. The earth hardens. Your boots leave crisp prints in the frozen soil. The chapel is colder than your home, but you visit anyway. You sit on the same pew, hands tucked in sleeves. Others join, not for worship, but for stillness. The candles flicker. No one speaks. You dream more often now. Dreams of spring, of food, of warmth. Dreams of green. You wake from them with a strange ache, not quite sadness, not quite hope. Frost covers the village paths. You walk carefully. You check on neighbors. Some do the same. There is less barter now, more sharing. A quiet agreement. If one hearth dies, another will offer flame. One morning, you wake to silence so deep it feels like snowfall. But there is no snow. Just air, dense and still. You hold your breath without meaning to. Inside, your family huddles closer. You tell stories, not to entertain, but to remind. When I was a child, winter meant apples in straw, meat hanging in the cold, candles on feast days. You do not mention the hunger. The children listen wide-eyed. One day, a stranger arrives again, this time with nothing but a walking stick. They ask for shelter. You give it without question. That night you eat together. A bowl passed between hands. A story told. It is enough. Frost deepens. The edges of the world harden. But within your home, the fire glows. The silence grows thicker, yes, but so does your patience. Your stillness. Your will. It begins before the sun disappears, an early darkness creeping in as the sky bleeds into gray. The cold sharpens, biting more deeply, clinging to wood, stone, and skin. You light the fire early. You make the soup thinner. You hold your children longer. The longest night. You've heard of it before, as a phrase, a story, a warning passed down. Now it feels like a living thing, a slow, silent creature that stretches across your village, pressing down on roofs, sliding beneath doors. Inside, your home glows faintly. The fire flickers with a quiet rhythm, as if it knows it must last. You place the logs carefully, one at a time, with reverence. You boil water not just for drinking, but for warmth, to fill jars, to pour over cloths wrapped around cold feet. No one visits tonight. Even the chapel sits still, its windows unlit. You imagine others in their homes, wrapped in layers, whispering stories, watching the shadows move. The world outside disappears. The frost turns to ice. The ice stiffens the branches, stills the birds, silences the forest. The wind begins low, then rises, not fierce but persistent, dragging its cold fingers across the village. Your family gathers close. You all sleep near the hearth, under layers of patchwork. You do not speak much. There is nothing new to say. You listen to the wind. You watch the flames. Time stretches. An hour feels like 3. You measure the night by the burning of candles, by the soft rise and fall of breath. You shift positions. You add more wood. You wait. You think of your parents, of other winters, of music, of noise, of abundance. These thoughts are like distant lanterns, dim, warm, too far to reach. You let them drift. Your child wakes once, whimpers, then falls asleep again with your hand on their back. Your spouse murmurs a name in sleep. You don't know whose. The wind knocks once at the door, like a question. Then it moves on. Eventually, a softness appears behind the windows. Not light, not yet, but the promise of it. The fire is down to coals. You rise, stiff, and place the last of the wood on the embers. A glow returns. You step outside. The cold greets you like a wall. But the sky has shifted. It is still gray, but higher somehow. The wind has gone. The frost remains. You breathe in deeply. The air burns in your chest. But it also clears something. The night is over. You return inside. You begin the day. You prepare what food you have. You wake the children. You warm their clothes. You sweep the hearth. You have passed through the longest night. It does not come all at once. It comes in hints. A softness to the air. A bird you haven't heard in months, calling from somewhere unseen. A thaw in the edge of the creek. One morning, you wake and find the frost has not returned. The windows remain clear. The ground, though still firm, gives slightly underfoot. You kneel in the garden and press your palm to the soil. Damp, not warm but no longer hard. Your neighbors notice too. A woman down the road leaves her door open longer. The old man walks a little farther each day. Children begin to talk again of games, of running. Their voices grow a shade louder, like buds beneath snow. You still ration, still count, still wait. But now you wait with a kind of anticipation, not just endurance. You look to the treetops for signs. Tiny green shoots, swollen buds. You gather twigs, and this time, not only for burning. The goats stir more. They nudge at the fence posts. One gives birth in the quiet of the barn, and the tiny bleats echo like bells. You smile, though your lips are dry. You carry the kid inside to warm it near the hearth. You take longer walks now, alone sometimes. You follow the edges of the field, past the streambed to the bend in the forest. There you find early flowers, violet and white, hugging the ground. You touch one gently. It moves. On another day, you find a worm in the soil. Alive, slow, twisting through the loosened earth. You stare at it for a long time. It feels like proof. The chapel sees more visitors again. The candles are still few, but the light feels fuller. Someone brings a flute. Another hums a tune. These things are not planned, but they happen. Your children grow curious. They ask about planting. You show them the seed bag, nearly empty. Still, you sort through it together, setting aside those that still look viable. You prepare a patch of ground. The nights are still cold. You still huddle close. But the wind has changed. It no longer whispers threat. It smells of thawed bark and damp grass. Food remains scarce. But it is no longer desperate. You speak of meals to come. You draw pictures in the dust of what you'll grow. You tell stories not of what was lost, but what might return. The village feels itself again, piece by piece. A roof is mended. A path swept. Someone repairs a cartwheel. You hear laughter. Not loud, not frequent, but real. One morning you step outside and smell rain. Not yet falling, but near. The sky is thick and promising. You lift your face to it. You close your eyes. And when it finally comes, it's not a storm, not a flood, but a soft, steady fall. You walk out into it, hands open. The earth darkens. The air fills with scent. You look back and see your family in the doorway, watching. You smile. The rain is not enough to erase the past, but it is enough to begin.